are you guys starting at 5?
I mean, I'm ready to go, but we can start whenever. It also depends on how quickly people roll in. I also usually give a little intro spiel before I turn it over to the speaker anyway.
All right. You just let me know what you want me to do. And
I guess, your mic sounds great, so I guess if you have slides, you can test your share screen, but other than that.
Yes.
Yeah, check that out. Tell me if you need anything, Dave, that I can do technically.
No, I'm good.
Cool.
Yep, so we should
Yeah, that's looking great.
I'm going to play, hold on a second, I need to stop sharing. I am going to play a couple of videos during this, and so I'll click the share sound, so just as a heads up that I'm going to attempt that.
Okay.
If it doesn't work, then I'll just do voiceover over it.
Yeah, well, we'll figure it out. It'll all be good. And John's also managing the recording of your talk, so he may ask you to do something related to that, but I think that should just be silently happening in the background.
Excellent.
You can do a little singing for us.
I'm not that great on that. And all I know is Wheels on the Bus and Itsy Bitsy Spider these days.
Sounds great.
Classics. But it'd also be like Pied Piper if I do that, and we'll have like a 2-year-old running in here making all sorts of noise. So I'm not sure she's home yet. She may show up if we can't meet her.
It is quite all right. She just may be a star to a room full of nerds for a second.
So I'll kick off the recording in a couple of minutes.
That sounds good. And yeah, as I said, we'll play it by ear on start time. It'll depend on when both you're ready and whenever enough people filtered in that I pulled the cord.
I'm ready, except in that most of my slides were put together yesterday and today, and so this will be.
Oh, I've never done that for talks I've had to give before. Never.
Yeah. But this is a friendly audience,
Yep. So, as I said, we'll see. I never know how many, despite our SVPs, I never know how many people we'll get. Sometimes we'll have 30, 40 people in this room. Other times it's 5. So hopefully you'll be on the bigger end, but who knows?
The rule of thumb, as long as there is more people in the audience than on the panel, you are...
Well, we're already beating that, so I think we're fine.
Kevin, I'm going to kick off the recording now because you need to accept it.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Got it. We're good.
Okay, good.
All right. So we'll hang tight. You'll know when I'm starting because I'll stand up and do a thing.
I'm going to go on mute for now.
Cool. Hey everybody, I'm going to do just a few more minutes to let people filter in, so we'll get started in just a few minutes.
Long time no see.
Oh, been a while, good to see you.
Good to see you. And here's another thing. So we did that fresh meeting, we'll get right from your parents.
Wow, welcome.
Another 80-person team. Abolish the overlord.
I'll do what I can.
Overlording is just
Yeah. Well, welcome.
absolutely.
Yeah, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes, so just let people filter in.
Fantastic. What is he doing
I have no idea. You'll have to ask her what's going on out there. She's the event manager. Let's see. We probably ought to be able to go ahead and get started here, so I will just share. Hey Dave, we got to feel we can get started if you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right, cool. Alrighty. And I also, I dimmed the lights here a little bit, so you'll hopefully show up a little better on our live stream. So,
Excellent.
okay. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and do this. All right. Welcome everyone to the latest monthly installment of the EFF Austin Meetup. We're kicking off 2024 here. Thanks for joining us. I see old new faces, welcome all. For those of you who are new and you're like, what is EFF Austin? Well, we are an Austin-based digital civil liberties organization. We closely work with Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is based in San Francisco. They are the nation's oldest and largest digital civil liberties advocacy group, been around since 1990. We're almost as old as them, been around since 91 or so thereabouts. You can think of EFF as basically kind of the ACLU for the internet. They work to protect your rights in emerging technological spaces, especially your First Amendment rights to freedom of speech and your Fourth Amendment rights, which is unreasonable search and seizure, but usually translates to privacy when we're talking about digital stuff. They do all sorts of cool stuff like defending things like net neutrality, end-to-end encryption, Section 230 of the CDA, and just trying to make sure that you are free to express yourself and that technology is working for you and not the other way around. They're really awesome people. Encourage you to donate and get involved wherever you might be. Also, EFF Austin, we are the oldest member of what's known as the EFA, or the Electronic Frontier Alliance. It is an affiliate network of about 100 different digital civil liberty groups based all throughout the United States. We're not directly affiliated with each other or EFF, but we all believe ideologically in similar issues, so we all work together at city, state, national levels on these issues. And if I didn't already say, my name is Kevin Welch. I'm the current president of the board at EFF Austin. You also might see John Webkowski managing our Zoom room there. He's another board member. But as I said, compared to national EFF, we're a much smaller org. We don't nearly have their budget, but we make up for it with expertise and passion. We mostly do stuff at the city and state level. We're primarily an educational organization. Mostly we do these monthly meetups, which are currently the second Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. here at Capitol Factory, who is gracious enough to have been hosting us for over 10 years at this point. So we're very appreciative of that. Yeah, we primarily have speakers speak on a diverse range of topics about emerging areas of technology and the law, and just discuss it, because we think an educated populace helps make better laws, can tell our lawmakers how to craft better policy. And to that end, we also do get involved a bit at policy and the city and state level. We provided testimony, most recently in the last Texas legislative session, we provided testimony on HB4, the Big Data Privacy Bill. You can actually, if you go check the video record, can see my testimony to the Senate online. Basically, the testimony was that we were happy they were passing it because it was better than the existing law, which was nothing, but we also didn't think the law went nearly far enough in protecting the consumer's data, so we had some recommendations of how they could have improved it, which maybe in the next session somebody will propose a bill to enhance it. So ongoing effort. We also were involved most recently at the city level in the ongoing debate around whether automated license plate readers should be brought back by the police department. While we did not stop them coming back, I am very happy that we had a very material impact on the debate. We managed to get them to drop data retention from 30 days all the way down to 7, which is still way too long, but obviously a week is much less damaging than a month from a surveillance standpoint. So we were very happy of that win, and a special thanks to certain members of Austin City Council, especially Councilmember Vela, for being our ally and advocate on this issue. Yeah, so education, a bit of political stuff. We've also been known to occasionally throw cool cyberpunk parties when I can convince enough eccentric tech millionaires and lawyers to give us money. So if you know any, feel free to introduce me. It's been a while since we had one of those. Yeah, so that's a little bit about us and what we do. If you find us interested and want to get involved, there's literally no barrier. We're a community org, so you can literally hop in and make something happen if you want to. So feel free to get after us and talk. So let's see, I guess finally I'll say what do we have coming up? So we have a few things in the pipeline. One, we're going to have a talk next month that I'm pretty excited about. This one, we're basically going to have a privacy lawyer who is from Ukraine. She's actually going to be talking with us about how surveillance works in Moscow and how the citizens of Moscow are actually surveyed by their government. So I know I want to learn more about that, so I highly recommend you come out for that. Also, we have a few potential other things in the works. We may be trying to put together an event with some European members of parliament who will be in Austin in March. We may try to put together a forum with them to discuss tech policy. I'm trying to get the current status of that from the DC think tank coordinating it. So we got that in the pipeline. Maybe stay tuned for that. Is there anything else? Oh, and we will also, in March as well, we will be hosting the monthly Nerd Night series over at Barrel Fun at the Mueller Draft House. We will be featuring the speakers there. It'll be me, Dr. Sharon Strover, and Dr. Molly Roy. They're both at UT, talking about various privacy-related things. I still actually need to figure out what I'll talk about, but I know Dr. Strover will be talking about her latest research on citizen attitudes to public surveillance in Austin, and Dr. Molly Roy will be talking about her research about the intersections of surveillance and dance, of all things. Her research is fascinating, so I encourage you to come out if you've never heard it. So I think that's everything we got in the pipeline coming up. So without further ado, I will introduce our speaker, give his bio, and then turn things over to him. So our speaker this month is Dave Maass. Dave is a returning speaker. We most recently featured him, I think, God, time flies, like over 5 years ago at our 2018 South by Southwest party. But Dave is the Director of Investigations at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the big one in San Francisco. As Investigations Director, Dave researches and writes about surveillance technology, government transparency, press freedoms, the U.S. Mexico border and immigration enforcement, prisoner rights, and other digital rights issues. He leads the Atlas of Surveillance project in partnership with the Reynolds School of Journalism at the University of Nevada, Reno, where he is a Reynolds Scholar in residence. And if you've never checked out the Atlas of Surveillance, it is absolutely awesome. It is a public website where you can see literally any city or state in the U.S., a complete catalog of all known surveillance technologies that local law enforcement agencies own and make use of. You can research Austin's if you're interested. There's definitely some in play. So Dave is incredible to steward that valuable transparency tool. So anyway, what is Dave talking to us about? Well, to give a lead in, there's obviously been a lot of coverage in the media about surveillance on the U.S. side of the U.S. Mexico border, but we don't actually ever hear very much about the Mexico side. Dave is going to share with us what EFF has learned about the various surveillance command centers in Mexico and how they communicate with U.S. law enforcement. It also is going to cover, and this is actually the thing that got this on my radar, wanting Dave to come talk to us, we're also going to discuss the Plataforma Centinela, which is a new surveillance network that will literally be run out of a 20-story tall tower in Ciudad Juarez, and its connection to Texas's efforts to patrol and control the border. So without further ado, take it away, Dave.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I get a thumbs up that you can hear me okay.
Woo.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for having me. Before I jump into it, I just want to give a really big congratulations to EFF Austin on the retention period for license plate readers, because we really have not seen many places in the country bring down the retention period to 7 days. Lowest we've seen has maybe been outside of a very old lot on the East Coast out of like New Hampshire or something, where they have like a 3-minute retention period. Everybody else is anywhere from 30 days to 5 years.
Fun fact, we won that because I argued that the New Hampshire law had not made the sky fall. And we actually even almost got them to go with 3 minutes, but they wouldn't go for it. We lost by 1 vote.
But nevertheless, though, 7 days is just amazing. It's just amazing in terms of protecting people's privacy. So yes, as promised, I am going to share, so I'm going to talk a lot about surveillance technology on the Mexican side of the border, but I'm just going to sort of share some slides and go ahead and start by talking a little bit about the work that EFF has been doing at the border over the last few years. So, starting in 2022, this was actually planned for 2020, but due to the pandemic, we had to put off our work a few years. But we've conducted 3 and let's say quarter tours of the U.S. Mexico border since 2022. So in July 2022, we did Southern California, so San Diego to Calexico, and we did actually both sides. So we visited Tijuana and Tecate and Mexicali. In October, we did southern Arizona, and we went all the way east until we got to El Paso. And then last year in the spring, we did South Texas and Rio Grande Valley, and then in the summer last year, I had a chance to visit San Diego again. And our goals were to meet with local advocates, journalists, government officials on both sides of the border. So we weren't just focused on the U.S. side, we were also focused on the Mexican side. And we wanted to figure out what sort of issues they were facing, whether they were under surveillance, what kind of technology maybe they'd seen, as well as to document technology firsthand. So we took a lot of photos of various surveillance towers and surveillance vehicles and other equipment installed on the U.S. and Mexican side of the border. But unlike a lot of people out there, we did spend a lot of time on the Mexican side meeting with officials and meeting with journalists and gathering information, which turned into a lot of research on a specific project, the Plataforma Centinela. I'm not going to talk about that quite yet, but I do want to tell you a little bit about some of the other stuff we've been doing, just in case for follow-ups you might be interested in later. We do have a map of surveillance towers as well as automated license plate readers that we've compiled. That map you can find at eff.org/border towers. As of right now, I think we have 395 surveillance towers mapped along the U.S. border. There's a couple of researchers right now who are using our map to photograph them all, and as they do so, they've been able to find more, and so we'll probably be up to 425 within the next month or so. And so this is the only map that really exists mapping out what the coverage of the so-called virtual wall looks like. We also took all of our photos and we released them under Creative Commons so that if you're putting together a journalistic piece or a research paper, you don't have to rely on government images and you don't have to rely on, say, Getty images or other proprietary images. You can use ours because they're under the Creative Commons license. We've also been making ourselves available for workshops on surveillance technology and how to investigate it at the border. This would count as one of those, but if you represent another group or you'd like another presentation specifically on the U.S. side, we can do that. We've done that for the Imperial Valley Social Justice Committee in California and the League of Forwarders San Diego, and we do that now basically every semester with the journalism students at the University of Texas, El Paso.
We may have you back for that, Dave. That sounds fascinating. So I'll keep that in pocket that if I need a speaker, you may be hearing from me.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't ask me to do that on this one.
Well, it's because I saw all the stuff about the tower, and I was like, what the hell?
We'll go over that, and then if people have any specific questions, I actually did include all of those slides in this slide deck in case I need to refer to them during the Q&A. One of my other favorite things to do is that I now do virtual reality tours of surveillance at the U.S. Mexico border, and so if you have access to a Meta Quest 2, Quest Pro, or now the Quest 3 virtual reality headset, I can actually take you on a tour of the border from San Diego to Brownsville and show you all different kinds of surveillance technology that have been documented by Google Street View car driving around. It's pretty fun. I've done it for everybody from Academy Award-winning documentary filmmaker El Morris to local journalists in San Diego to activists. Really fun time. This spring, we're also going to be putting out a zine that serves as a sort of birdwatcher's guide to surveillance at the U.S.-Mexico border, because that's something that we realized people needed, was a handy guide to be able to look at something and know what it is. So we'll be contacting EFF Austin when it's ready to see how many copies you want in English and Spanish, and we will send you a stack to give out. We're also developing a security guide, like a 1-hour educational module for journalism students who are planning to cover cross-border communities, and we're doing that in partnership with UTEP, as well as San Diego State University. And then it's a little early to say, but I'm sure I can give you a preview, but we are going to have some museum-like exhibits that we'll be announcing later in this year based on our research and our work. But a lot of what we've been doing and researching has been on the U.S. side. A lot of what you read will be on the U.S. side. Basically, journalists at U.S. News outlets and English-speaking news outlets really aren't paying attention to much of what's happening on the Mexican side. So that was why, when we were figuring out our fieldwork plan, we wanted to make sure we spent time on the Mexican side doing some research. Now, I don't have comprehensive data on everything being used like we do on the U.S. side, but I do have a little taste to help get people interested in learning more about it. So one of the main ways that surveillance is structured in Mexico are from these, for lack of a better word, these C systems. So SA cuatro, SA cinco, SA seis. Basically, the Mexican government likes to create these surveillance headquarters and then give them a bunch of names that start with C, and then one-up each other, whether they have a C4 or a C5 or C5I or C6, and now a C7. But each of these headquarters generally have a function like a real-time crime center would in the U.S. So there's usually a giant wall of monitors that are tapped into a camera network throughout the city. You can see in this picture that there's banks of computers, and each desk represents a different part of the state and local government, whether it's 911 calls or it's the police. There might even be a room where they have their CBP liaisons. We were able to visit 2 of these. We visited one in Mexicali, which is in Baja, California, and then we visited the one in Nogales, which is in Sonora. And these are just really interesting facilities in that. The way I describe how this, you see this camera wall, the way I describe this is it's like a DJ. There's one particular dude who's got 2 mouse pads who's just going like this, controlling, going from one camera to another, zooming in, tilting them around, looking for things, and just quickly going through it like he's, conducting a symphony. And he never seems to you're not really sure what he's looking for. I'm not sure he really knows what he's looking for, but that's how it kind of operates, where everybody in this room is kind of ignoring these screens because there's not really necessarily anything going on with them. But oftentimes these are where 911 calls are coming in. In Mexico, they also have a panic button system, as they call it. I've never seen one of these myself, but I believe that a lot of businesses and other public places have the ability to hit a button that essentially calls the 911 services directly, and all of that feeds in there. But they're also ingesting criminal justice data and license plate reader data, and sometimes using predictive policing algorithms to do some analysis. But these are just command headquarters for surveillance in any given jurisdiction. One of the other sort of features that is really unique to Mexico are things called arcos de seguridad. And I want to apologize that whenever I'm doing a public presentation, my Spanish pronunciation just gets really, really bad. And so when I'm with my Spanish teacher, it's really great. When I'm in front of an audience, I start to get stage fright, so please forgive me. But Mexico has a lot of the same technologies that we have in the U.S., whether it's license plate readers or face recognition. But one thing that they have that we tend not to see in the U.S. are these security arches. And you'll find these throughout Mexico, but particularly in border areas, and they look like they're signs, over a road, advertising something, or welcoming you to the city, like this one that's welcoming you to Chihuahua on the left. But really, these are designed as data collection points. So there will be cameras on top, license plate readers on top. Depending on how they're configured, they're going to photograph people's faces and potentially do biometric collection. So as I mentioned, these security arches throughout this talk, you'll have an idea of what these look like. If you're ever driving through Mexico and you see one of these, take a look backwards at your rear view and see if you can spot any surveillance technology on it. So we have mapped out a lot of these C centers in the border states. Now these are found throughout Mexico. Our efforts were specifically on the states on the border. You can see we have several dozen of these. Some of them are, just one center, and some of them are sub-centers. So you'll see, like in the state of Chihuahua, there's this series of sub-centers where each one is its own facility that ties into one really big one. So now I want to talk to you about and show you some information about the Plataforma Centinela. And this is something that jumped on our radar. We read about it in the news. Nobody had reported on the U.S. And we were really starting to get really worried about it because nothing like this, we've seen nothing like this in either North America or Latin America in terms of such a concentrated surveillance vision. And I'm going to show you the little promotional video. I actually need to re-share to get the audio going on this. But I want to show you
Standing by, hopefully we get the audio.
Yeah, it should. I did share audio. It's going to be in Spanish. If you don't speak Spanish, it doesn't matter because it's just propaganda anyways, and you're going to get the sense of what they're going for regardless of what language you speak. And I'm going to show this because it's so ridiculous, and it will really give you a sense of the marketing and propaganda that is going in to try to sell this to the public. All right, we ready?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
Torre Centinela. Recuperando un espacio en el centro de Ciudad Juárez, se realizará el Centro de Seguridad Estatal Torre Centinela, con una imponente arquitectura que contará con 20 pisos, albergando a toda la Secretaría de Seguridad Pública del Estado de Chihuahua. Contará con 4 pisos de centros de mando operativos, los cuales tendrán un video wall de 360 grados, abarcando 140 metros cuadrados por piso, donde se supervisarán las operaciones de los subcentros instalados en 13 municipios estratégicamente elegidos, monitoreando la ubicación de las patrullas, ubicación de los eventos que suceden y estadísticas en tiempo real. Contará también con videoanálisis, investigación para obtener información y lograr carpetas de investigación para procesar a los delincuentes. Se generará inteligencia con bases de datos obtenidas de la plataforma a través de inteligencia artificial, una sala de crisis donde se podrán tener reuniones con las diferentes corporaciones de los 3 niveles, sala de operaciones de la Policía Cibernética. Entre otras importantes áreas contará con sala de prensa, sala de honor para nuestros policías caídos, helipuerto, entre otras. La Torre Centinela será un edificio sustentable e inteligente con la mayor seguridad, que lo convierte como la única torre en América Latina digna de pertenecer a una policía de clase mundial.
All right, so as you can probably tell from this, the state of Chihuahua has been watching too many movies and decided to produce their own Avengers-style trailer to really promote this ridiculous technological, hubris that is the Plataforma Centinela and the Torre Centinela project. I don't want to start it again.
Torre Centinela.
All right, so just to sort of summarize what is going on in this video and this overall plan. So we're going to have a 20-story tower, but that tower is not the only thing. This is going to cover not just Ciudad Juarez, but 13 municipalities across the state of Chihuahua, each with its own sort of mini facility. They're talking about installing 4,800 cameras. These are fixed cameras, so these are the kind of surveillance cameras that you're going to be used to that are pointed in one direction and don't move around. But in addition, they're going to install 3,065 pan-tilt zoom cameras. Have you ever heard of a PTZ camera? These are the cameras that look like little domes that are kind of usually it's something that's hanging down and there's a dome underneath. And pan-tilt zoom means that there is actually a remote controller, somebody who's able to use a joystick to move it around, pan up and down, zoom in on things, usually at 360 degrees. They're also doing about 1,800 license plate readers. And we talked about it a second ago, but maybe we didn't explain it enough. But license plate readers are cameras that capture your license plate, turn it into letters and numbers, attach the time and the date stamp, as well as the geolocation, and put it into a database. So this really results in police creating databases of everywhere you've driven over a period of time. In Austin, it's going to be 7 days, but elsewhere, it's going to be years that they're able to go back. CBP uses these in the U.S., and they hold data for 15 years. But they're going to be putting up almost 1,800 of these across the region. 102 of those security arches that I showed you, they're going to have 74 drone systems throughout the state of Chihuahua, as well as 15 anti-drone systems, so ways to take out other people's drones. They're going to be using facial recognition based off of driver's license databases. They're going to have 40 mobile kind of command centers that can drive around and go to other places and have set of surveillance networks. And then there's going to have tablets, 2,000 tablets that are distributed to law enforcement officers who are able to access all of these data systems just, with the device they have in hand. There's also a lot of claims about artificial intelligence being used. We're not really sure what that means in terms of artificial intelligence. They just use it a lot as ways. We think it's going to be predictive policing, but who knows? Everybody uses artificial intelligence a lot. I do want to show you one particular screen capture from this video, if I can find it. So this thing right here. So we have not heard them say exactly what this software is that they're illustrating here, but we've been doing a lot of research into a technology called USIS that is being used around the world, which gives somebody, a person at a control desk like this, the ability to access any camera, not just pan tilt zoom cameras, but actually body cameras in real time. At a police conference recently, I saw the police chief for the Royal Bahamas actually open up this software during a demonstration in San Diego, open it up, and open up a body-worn camera of somebody in the Bahamas in real time. That's what this looks like. I don't know that they're using fuses, but that is exactly what fuses looks like. So they might be able to even tap into that sort of thing. All right, so I want to also show you some of the propaganda efforts that are really going into this, because we don't actually have a lot of information about how this actually works in reality. What we have is a lot of the efforts that they are doing to convince the public that this is something that people should do. So one of the things that they did is in Santa Rita, they set up something called the Pabellon Centinela, the Sentinel Pavilion, a little theme park for surveillance. So here you can see they're showing, this is what the monitoring center is going to look like. And they're like, let's get little kids in paintball outfits, let them run around doing stuff. Let's get them into little fake ATV vehicles so they can drive around the little city having fun. Like, this is a great time for all your kids. This is one that really gets me, is like the coloring station, where you color a 911 operator, slash video camera watcher, and have kids involved in that. And then a little gym where, you could climb to a rock climbing wall and, have a lot of fun. This is what the charm offensive that they are doing in Chihuahua right now to get the public on board. Whereas if you try to get information about it, that's where they start to stonewall you. And I'll talk about that again in a second. But this isn't just something that is going to be staying in Mexico. So in April of 2022, Chihuahua Governor Campos made a big deal of coming over to Austin and meeting with Governor Abbott and signing a memorandum of understanding. Now, this memorandum of understanding was mostly about making it easier for trucks to come across the border, for economic purposes. But buried in the whole discussion was a lot of stuff about the Plataforma Centinela. And I didn't really see anybody cover it. Even though people covered the press conference that went with it, not a lot was actually said about this particular element. But during the press conference, she literally said Texas could have eyes on this side of the border through this system. And here's a slide, one of the few pieces of information that were released from the negotiations between Texas and Chihuahua was this document talking about all the things I showed you before. But I want to point out one particular line here, and I can't really highlight it easily, but it says one of the things they're going to be sharing among states is migrant biometrics and a personal information database, including the driver license registry. So what we're talking about is data from the state of Chihuahua being fed to the Texas Department of Public Safety that includes maybe fingerprints, face recognition, iris scans, tattoos, who knows, as well as other stuff for driver's licenses as a way to coordinate the interception of migrants. And keep in mind, this happened in April 2022. That was before recent legislation was signed, enhancing Texas's ability or its self-given ability to detain migrants. Nevertheless, I wanted to show you just a quick clip from that event. And this should go right to it. Yeah.
Very good. We're going to sign the agreement, but before we do, I want to highlight one paragraph that is of great importance. It says that Chihuahua has begun and will continue enhanced border security enforcement measures on the Chihuahua side of the border, both at ports of entry and along the Rio Grande River, to prevent illegal immigration from Chihuahua into Texas. These measures will include the Sentinel platform, which is a technological investment of approximately $200 million that will allow Chihuahua State Police to track vehicles from the moment they leave an industrial park in Juarez until they cross the border into Texas. In addition, the state of Chihuahua is incorporating technologies such as drones to patrol the border, artificial intelligence databases connected to driver's license registry, and biometric filters to assist in the capture of cartel leaders. This is a demonstration of commitment from a strong governor who is working collaboratively with the state of Texas, and I'm proud to sign the agreement with her at this time.
I would call it as a new border model. So thank you very much, Governor Abbott, for making it possible.
Thank you.
In Chihuahua.
Very good.
We'll try to, there we go. So here's the memorandum of the section of the memorandum of understanding, which he just read, but he had added on a few things to talk about it. If you were not paying attention, this is a very long press conference. I don't think people were really paying attention, and they missed this whole part where they mentioned we're going to be talking about, they're going to be dealing with capturing cartel leaders, etc. But they mentioned several times that this is about preventing illegal immigration. And so we're seeing a kind of change, an unprecedented, fundamental change in how the border is enforced, with not only the state of Texas taking matters into its own hands, but the state of Chihuahua also taking things into its own hands and creating a partnership between those two states outside of the agreements between the country of Mexico and the United States federal government. The state of Texas also has agreements with Coahuila and Nuevo León, but neither of those states really introduced this kind of level of technology. But I want you to sort of notice that price tag. We're talking about $200 million. Actually, it's now quite a bit more than that they've invested in this. So, but this $200 million, which I think is actually closer to $250 million at this point, was all awarded through a no-bid contract to a particular company called Seguritech. Seguritech has quite the reputation elsewhere in Mexico. It has received no-bid contracts in at least 10 jurisdictions for surveillance technology. It is the major surveillance company in Texas. In the U.S., we do not have a company with as much a lock on the market as Seguritech has in Mexico. There have been all sorts of questions about the propriety of this, whether there have been kickbacks. People would not be surprised to hear that there's corruption in Mexico, and ultimately there may be allegations surfaced here against this company. I know that previously other vendors have also been caught in corruption schemes when providing this kind of technology to the government. But this graphic from El Financiero really does show you what kind of money is involved in this, and the output of it and how it results in increased surveillance across the nation of Mexico. However, there have been a lot of criticism, and this is one of the surprising things about this Chihuahua contract, is that Chihuahua adopted this contract despite there being all sorts of issues when it comes to this technology. So in Sinaloa, for example, reporters found that 83% of the cameras were no longer working by the end of the contract. In Tijuana, they found that security detective promised the government high definition cameras, but they ended up giving them two megapixel cameras, like the type of web camera that you would have had in the mid-2000s. And in response to all of this criticism against security tech, the company hired a firm to take down and censor reports that criticize its business practices. That's not the only kind of lack of transparency that we're looking at with this program. The Security Secretariat and the Finance Secretariat both deemed that all information about the project is classified. When the Congress, the state Congress, certain members of the Chihuahua, essentially state legislature, wanted to declassify those documents and do an audit and make those documents open to the public, there was a vote, and the Congress voted it down and actually agreed that the documents should be kept secret. And their news organizations have filed dozens of public records requests in Mexico, and they've just not been answered. EFF did something similar on the U.S. side. We filed public records requests with various Texas agencies to try to understand how this data sharing was going to work out. Governor's office, we've got no information responsive to your request. Texas Department of Public Safety, no responsive records. Attorney General's office, no information responsive. El Paso County Sheriff's Office, no records responsive. Somehow, they have this big press conference about this $200 million surveillance system that's going to give Texas eyes on the Mexican side of the border, and nobody has any records whatsoever. And I just want to point out, this is not, they said we have records that are responsive, but we are withholding them on security grounds. They didn't say they have the records that they were withholding. They just denied that records existed, period. So there's this whole, a total cloud over how this partnership is going to work in practice. Now, the current status of this is that the 13 regional sub-centers are now operated and up and running. 3,000 of the 4,800 cameras have been installed. The tower is under construction. It was supposed to be completed next month, but it looks like it will not be completed until the end of 2024 because Security Tech has underestimated what the foundation of the building was going to require. But nevertheless, the government has started putting out press releases and statements about how this has been useful in recovering stolen vehicles. And this is something that we hear a lot with surveillance, that they will promise you the world, that this is going to deal with gang violence, it's going to end murders, this is going to, blah, 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 blah. But ultimately, it ends up dealing with stolen cars. That just seems to be a really big thing. Something I find hilarious, though, is that some of the news headlines aren't there, is that criminals have just begun taking out the cameras already. So there have been news reports about criminals shooting the cameras with guns, and here's one of the video footage of a group of men shooting down cameras. And so already it's proving ineffective because this is a very, very easy type of system sometimes to undermine if you are a criminal in the first place. One other development that I find very frightening, this came out of a newspaper called El Blanco y Negro, and out of Chihuahua, that have reported that they're going to start installing cameras in essentially daycares and kindergartens, giving police live, real-time access to video footage of people's children. This is just something I've never seen. I mean, this is just frightening to me that this is something, but you can see the date on this. Well, this is, like news from yesterday, essentially. It's news from today. This is actually the news that came out this morning, that this is something that they were going to do. And with that, I believe I have tapped out my slides. I'm happy to take questions. And here's my email address if you need to get in touch with me. I'm not using Twitter as much, so I'm going to grant them my handle, even though it's the same as my Blue Sky handle, but there's no Blue Sky handle here on that platform.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. That was something. yeah, and you're not wrong that nothing's being reported about any of this. So thank you for your work. Yeah, we got questions for our speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's that?
Right. As a person from Ukraine, a former inmate, and U.S. citizen who also happened to build broadband access in Mexico, I quickly calculated that the total bandwidth required for all the cameras would constitute about 300 gigabits per second. And the 20-story building with 145, if I'm not mistaken, square meters per floor does not represent any data storage. Where the hell do they store all that data? Because I also happen to be a solution architect with Cisco. I know how much does it take.
Where the hell is the equivalent of the giant NSA server farm in Utah in Mexico holding all this?
I wish I knew. This is, I mean, like a lot of surveillance, like we raised a lot of the privacy and civil liberties concerns, but a lot of it is just the concerns that you have to raise are just straight up how this is waste and fraudulent and how it's not actually practical what they're proposing. One thing I didn't really get into the slides because it's really hard for me to wrap my head around it, is that there's a very strange financial relationship going on here as well, where actually Security Tech owns the facility and owns all of the data collected by the facility until the state of Chihuahua pays it off in like 5 years' time.
Oh, the cops don't own the data. They have to bribe Seguritech to get their own data?
Right, so Seguritech's part of the deal. So Seguritech is fronting all the expenses for this because they're going to have ownership over it. And Seguritech also does a lot of stuff like that. Like you saw the term, you know, the C5s and the C4s and the C6s. Seguritech actually trademarked C5, I believe, so that it can be the only one that gets a contract for C5s because it owns the term. Nobody else can actually sell that to the government.
Wow. Other questions? Yeah.
Who's running Seguritech?
Who's running Seguritech? Do we know? And do we know, I assume the follow-up, who do they know in the Mexican government?
So that is known, but not necessarily known by me off the top of my head. It's a very, that's a whole area of things that have been well researched by the Mexican press, but I'm afraid I don't have that at the tip of my tongue.
I don't think we'd be wrong to assume that it's probably somebody prominent with powerful connections.
I mean, this goes back to the Nieto administration. So if you read our blog post about this, you know, we do have some information about, you know, the relationships with the government of Mexico going back. But, you know, it's a little out of scope for EFF to do deep corruption investigations. You know, we do the civil liberties impact stuff. So we do know to provide some links to, you know, some of their history. But they've been around since 1995 as a small business selling neighborhood alarms. But they've just grown bigger and bigger and bigger over the years. I would look at some of the reporting on Azeta Tijuana about the company. And, you know, this company has all sorts of, you know, subsidiaries that are also selling stuff to the government. It's a whole thing.
All right, I got a question for you. Has EFF been exploring essentially suing Texas for violating the Freedom of Information Act and claiming they don't have records they do have?
For the state of Texas?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, working for a law firm, I'm not allowed to say anything about our legal strategy whatsoever.
Right.
And what we might be thinking about in the future, I'm just not allowed to say anything about.
Fair enough. I guess just going to broaden the question, I mean, just like, it seems very concerning that, you know, and maybe I'm not a lawyer, but it sounds like that it's like Texas is breaking the law by not claiming there's no security reason to not give you those records and just claim they don't have them when they do.
Well, to be honest, it's part of a troubling trend that we've seen with the Texas government. And I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, you all know what's going on with the Attorney General's office in Texas. You know,
sadly, yes.
I mean, I was a reporter in San Antonio in the mid-2000s, and I thought it was bad when Greg Abbott was the Attorney General and Rick Perry was the governor. But I would say, by comparison to where we are now, I mean, they were, you know, saints of open government because they had a process that you could appeal a rejection like this, and sometimes the Attorney General's office ruled in your favor, like, and you got records back that had been rejected. That's not the case now. Like now, if you have a records rejection and you appeal to the Attorney General's office, they just agree with whatever the rejection was at hand, and they make it impossible, next to impossible, for you to even argue. Like it used to be, you could send an email saying, or a letter saying, here's why I think you should release the records. Like you go and try to find how to submit that letter now, and you'll just get a roundabout of like websites and links eventually saying that like there's no email to send it to, you gotta show up in hand with a bouquet of flowers and a box of candy that, you know, and then maybe somebody will accept your argument and read it.
Wow. More questions? Yeah, sure.
The Texas in particular, so we're talking about the Texas legislation and everything else, and do you apply Texas local laws, like long-arm statutes and everything else, or federal freedom of information laws to this situation? Because most probably the data is stored in Mexico, and when Texas is responding that they don't have any data, they're right, because all the server farms are out there.
Well, basically, are they right on a technicality that they're using third-party doctrine? We don't actually have our own data.
Well, I mean, my request is just for information about how they're getting the data. Like, what other emails might there be? What other plans might have been? You know, what, like, there would have had to be something like a data sharing agreement signed if they're going to receive data. Like, I'm not asking for the data themselves that they're getting, but just like, you know, just basic documents that you would expect to exist.
Basically, it'd be the equivalent of if I went to the local fusion center, and I'm not saying give me the camera feeds, just can I have some basic info on your program?
Yeah, and you can often get that.
Right.
You know, like it's often not. I mean, we don't do it with the Texas. We've never done it with the Texas fusion centers, I know, but we do it in the California ones all the time. We get plenty of information from them about how things operate. It was just really surprising that there wasn't any, you know, further documentation beyond the memorandum of understanding and like a slide, you know, a slide from a presentation that they had already published online. And, you know, during that press conference, you know, Abbott says something like, you know, Campos is going to be providing me with a much longer in-depth, like, proposal. And I'm like, okay, well, can I have that longer proposal? It's been, you know, 10 months since you talked about that. Surely they would have provided that to you by now. But no, that doesn't even exist. And somehow there's no emails or any communication between them since that press conference.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? It's fine if people don't have them. I certainly can keep going for a minute or two. Or also, you know, we always can wrap up early. We do just get the room for tires. But I think I have another one. So, yeah, what was it? I wanted to ask. Okay, so obviously you're getting stonewalled by everybody on getting any real data on this program, and I was amused by you talking about, like, you know, the obsession with trumpeting recovering stolen cars, because you'd be amazed how much the pro-ALPR city council members would keep talking about their constituents obsessed with stolen cars as a justification for the technology. But I find myself wondering, so, you know, yeah, they trot out anecdotes, and yes, just like with ALPRs, getting actual hard statistical data on success rates is hard to impossible. Is there any data about, like, whether this program ostensibly, which is, you know, originally is being sold to catch drug smuggling, and depending on your ideology, you're either for or against its scope creep into illegal immigration, but is there any documentation or evidence that this is troublingly extending further, and that people who should not be being arrested are being targeted or stalked or harassed with this surveillance network?
I mean, it's still early days with that sort of thing, but, you know, I think what a lot of people are worried about when we talk to advocates in Mexico, one of the things they're worried about is that they're hyper aware of the corruption in the, you know, police agencies, law enforcement agencies in Mexico. I mean, it's quite, you know, infamous that, you know, cartels and, you know, infiltrate and co-opt military. And so the fact that they're collecting all this data, there's no guarantee that the information they're collecting is going to stay, siloed to just the, 5 trustworthy cops in Mexico.
Like there could literally be back doors siloing this into cartel data centers. Like that's not at all unlikely, actually.
Yeah. Or, if a cartel wants to go find somebody, calling up their insider and saying, hey, can you go look up where this person was seen on a license plate reader? And, or it doesn't even have to be the cartels. It could just be political officials who want to take retribution on their political enemies,
Right, that's the dangerous spiral stuff like this turns into. Retaliation for just the other team, even though they didn't do anything illegal.
Yeah, but I mean, we some points that like local advocates have made, like we talk to people who work on issues of like missing women and murdered women and missing journalists and murdered journalists, and they're like, if you're putting up this system, are you going to be able to find these women and bring justice for these women? Are you going to be able to find, bring the killers of journalists to justice? And in their experience, whenever something happens to somebody, those cameras are mysteriously not functional, and they're not, suddenly accessible, and they're not able to solve these crimes that they claim to be able to solve. And so there's a lot of questions about this. And, I think that maybe here in the U.S. we should be paying more attention to what people's experiences are in Mexico, because maybe we don't think we're going to encounter them here, but I think we will eventually.
And I guess another follow-up I have is, so I think you mentioned in some of your reporting I've read that this tower, when it's done, is going to have some insane colossal range. Like, is it correct that up to 100 miles into the U.S. it will be gathering surveillance data?
I'm not sure that, I don't know if I said that.
Maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I saw that floated around somewhere.
Definitely an EFF.
Nick is saying EFF put something out about it.
Data would be fed into like DPS headquarters in Austin, and so, but it's not very far. I mean, this tower is not very far from the border at all. But I don't know if it's going to be able to see into the U.S. But I think what I can say is that certainly the towers on the U.S. side can see 7 miles into Mexico.
And that's known, and this would see at least as far into the U.S., we would think.
It's a different kind of thing altogether, so I'm not really sure. I don't want to make any conclusions or suggestions about that because it's just outside of my knowledge.
Okay, fair enough. I know you're being a responsible reporter, don't want to speculate.
Not to be pedantic, but just to point out, you said the surveillance won't necessarily literally see into Austin, but feeding data all the way into Austin is pretty damn far. That's crazy how far that data's gone. That's all I'm trying to say.
We're just talking about like a login to a software system that's already in the cloud. So
that's fair.
I mean, it's not as far as San Diego to the Bahamas. I'll tell you that.
Well, fair point. But that actually raises the following question: like, how will any law enforcement in the U.S. be able to tap into this fingers thing and see this data anywhere?
That is what I want to know.
I bet you $20
like,
nice will do
like
it.
what we don't know is that when they say Mexico is going to have eyes on this side of the border, are they talking about like, somebody at DPS can call up somebody on the phone and say, hey, can you look up this person? Or are they talking about that kind of log-in access? Like, we just don't know. I mean, what we have heard are like, anecdotes about, the types of things that the U.S. is sharing with people in these C5 centers, whether that's live video footage or other things. And that is like a whole other concern. So we know it's actually going both directions.
Is there any actual transparency or accountability going on around this at all? Or are there any people with actual power, actual lawmakers who could actually stop this, who are trying or raising concerns?
It seems like there are. There have been, requests for audits and complaints filed against them. But to be honest, like once we start getting into like the politics of Mexico, that's a little bit beyond what I'm an expert in.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So all the mentions of AI, they said AI databases connected to driver's license databases. So could that be like there's going to be some kind of predictive, like, I don't know, these are like flagged individuals type of thing?
So that's my worry. That's what they're doing, is going to be predicting people to target. But without more information, we have a fun blog post about the city of General Escobedo, because they had a predictive policing program, and we started doing freedom of information requests in Mexico, or their equivalent in Mexico, and it took us a very long time to get records about this, very thing that you're talking about, some predictive policing. But I wanted to sort of show you, in terms of like what type of competence we're talking about when it comes to like programs like this. So we put in a public records request, and they claim for this predictive policing program that we knew existed because we had seen it mentioned in speeches and in press releases, and we wanted to know more about it. And they came back to us and they said, City of Escobedo said, we don't have any records. And then they sent us a photo essay of, maybe this is a better version of it, a photo essay illustrating how they searched for the documents and to prove that they couldn't find them. So here they are outside of the building. Here they are at the front door of the investigation and analysis, police investigation and analysis department. Here they are sitting at a computer looking for the records that we asked for.
In what universe do they think this proves anything?
Oh, well, wait a second though, because here they are looking at file cabinets. And then, this is my favorite, they're looking in the coffee cupboard. Look, we looked where we keep the tea and coffee. We didn't find it in there. I'm so sorry. And then yes, more filing cabinets and drawers. Like, this is the type of competence we're talking about when it comes to like transparency and learning more, is that they'll send us a picture of them looking at a coffee cupboard and ask us to like accept that. We did fight them on it, and we won, and they gave us a bunch of records, so it was pretty cool.
Well, that's incredible. I've got a new story to tell people at parties. That's amazing. Any more questions? Yes, us.
Yeah, I can stop calculating.
Oh no, I like your calculations.
No, yeah, it's one thing to put together all that thing, like cameras and everything else, that I, as being a person from Ukraine, which is very close by mentality to Mexico, I can easily see how this is done. It's very difficult to maintain such an infrastructure. Do you have any signs that anyone or anything from the US is chipping in to maintain that infrastructure? Because it generates about 10 terabytes of data per hour.
Is the U.S. providing material resources to this Mexican firm to assist the immense infrastructural challenges of running this?
I don't think so, as far as I know. I think from what I've heard, and I want to just sort of make sure I know that I'm sort of talking a little bit speculation, a little bit from just the scuttlebutt out there, but like one of the things that we've heard from surveillance vendors is it's very difficult for them to work in Mexico because so much of the infrastructure is based on Chinese technology, and there are various sanctions on being able to use Chinese surveillance equipment in the United States. And so they can't even really do much in Mexico. So it's actually very rare, surprisingly, to hear about US companies working in Mexico. I know, Predpol, which was, I believe now defunct predictive policing company that's been merged with others, was trying to operate in Mexico. But I haven't really heard much from surveillance vendors because the cameras are usually being produced by Chinese manufacturers.
Oh.
But I mean, I don't know where they're storing this stuff. Maybe that's why they were giving them 2 megapixel cameras instead.
Well, that'd certainly make it much easier now, wouldn't it?
The 4 megapixel camera requires about 50 megabit per second.
Which is still decent, yeah.
Yeah,
still decent.
And we usually use Wi-Fi as start with that.
Anybody who hasn't asked a question yet, who has a question? Fine, if not. Yeah.
So
it kind of sounds like the company setting all this up isn't capable of doing it. Is that part of the research to see if this is actually going to become a working network, or if it's just kind of something that they're attempting to build and we'll just kind of keep dumping money into?
Is it a case of continual, like, oh, sunk cost fallacy? Yes, you paid us and it doesn't work, but we promise if you give us more money, it will finally work.
I mean, I think that's one outcome here, you know? Like, one of the things with surveillance is that we see that there's not a lot of institutional memory. There's changeover in elected officials, and so one elected official will come in and campaign on this and, you know, make a deal, and then they'll leave office, and then the next one is come in and stuck with the bill, and maybe you throw some more money in.
Let's see, any...
I mean, do you guys have the IDs about the cartels and criminals like taking out this equipment?
Any more info about ostensibly the cartels shooting out the cameras and stuff? Any more?
No, I just saw that in the news today when I was like trying to figure out where the status was as of today, and that's like news from like the last 7 days or so.
That there's literally cartel gangs roaming around wearing masks, shooting the cameras out, basically.
Yeah, but I mean, there's been news stories about the cartel setting up their own camera networks to keep eyes on the police. Like they're very technologically sophisticated.
Yep.
Yeah. A legal question. Right in front of me on the smartphone is a map of all the publicly available cameras in the downtown Austin because they're all published. So I can literally click on any camera and I can see image. Nothing prevents me from opening an API to that camera and effectively recording what I need, then analyzing the data and then deleting it. So legally, this is exactly what the US could have done to the data on the Mexican side. We're opening an interface to the camera, we are taking the data that we need, we're analyzing it, and then we're destroying it. And then when responding to your request, everyone is legally correct that, well, nothing exists.
Yeah, I mean, basically, to that end, is there evidence that these, I know in Austin it's the Halo camera network, and that yes, many of them are on the Internet of Things publicly accessible. Like, is this whole surveillance network in Mexico going to be on the public Internet of Things? Could anybody tap into these if they wanted to?
That I do not know. I imagine that they probably will not be intended to.
But we all know how great Internet of Things security is. Oh, wow.
Indeed.
Let's see. That's fine. If we're already at 8 here, and if we're running low on questions, that is fine.
And I actually probably got a jet.
I know. I'm also trying to be respectful. I know that you said you have family duties, so I didn't want to keep you too long. Any final questions, especially from anybody who didn't get to ask one?
I only have an anecdotal evidence from Mexico. It will only take 30 seconds.
Well, we can anyway, because your stories have been great. If nobody else has anything, which is fine if they don't. Yeah, what do you want to take us out on?
Yeah, when we were building access networks in Mexico, we were putting a bunch of equipment on the poles, and we had exactly the same problem. People were shooting at equipment on the poles, and no matter how hardened the equipment is, you cannot compete with it, some 50 caliber gun from the cartels. And the solution was absolutely anecdotal and very effective. We started putting the Santa Maria de Guadalupe picture on every piece of equipment that we're installing. Nobody in their right mind in the cartel would shoot anything with a clearly visible picture of Santa Maria de Guadalupe in Mexico. You would rather
that
shoot your
actually
balls
worked. Wow.
So that's something to be proud of.
Wow, that is fascinating.
On this optimistic note.
Dave, any final things for us? Any parting thoughts? I guess maybe I'll take us out on the philosophical. I'm sure there will be many people, including many people I'm sure you've talked to while sharing your research, who will ignore the real dangers of this because they'll zero in on how they maybe ideologically like it. I'm sure there's people who've told you, but if it's stopping illegal immigration, it's all worth it. What do you say to those people?
Well, I mean, it depends on who I'm talking to, and I've got all sorts of talking points, but what really comes to mind in response to what you're saying is a conversation we had with the sheriff of Santa Cruz County, Arizona, so that's the Nogales area in Arizona, and he's a Republican, he's a proud Republican, has been since like the Reagan administration, and he hates the surveillance down there. He's an ex-DEA officer as well, he's the sheriff, and he just hates it, and he explains that like, Nogales depends on commerce, and it depends on people, it depends a little bit on tourism, but it depends on the free flow of economic trade between both sides of Nogales. And people who live on either side of Nogales, and the Mexican side or the U.S. side, see themselves as one people in one city. And that when the government comes in and puts up razor wire, concertina wire, when they put a spy balloon over the city, when they install these surveillance towers, and they make it look like a war zone, that's bad for their economy. That is bad for their business. That's bad for their ability to survive. And it's not warranted that their crime rate is significantly lower than what you might see in a major city on the interior of the U.S. And so they feel like this is a lot of money being put into political theater, and the price is being paid not only by the U.S. tax dollar, but by the communities that are trying to thrive. And so I would use that argument for people who are coming at it, they're like, I only care about the migrants or whatever. And it's like, well, it's not addressing that problem at all. When you hear about people complaining about a migrant crisis, it's usually like people completely in view in El Paso under a bridge. You don't need a camera or surveillance system to know that there's a crowd of people camped out under the overpass. When there's the caravan in San Diego, people have been tracking the caravan across the country of like moving its way towards San Diego for weeks. Like, it did not require surveillance. The surveillance stuff is mostly like a political thing and a money driven.
But maybe the surveillance can catch Schrodinger's illegal immigrant. Did you think of that? No, that's wonderful counter. Yeah, I'm going to keep that one in mind. Thank you for that, Dave. That's a wonderful counter argument you raised there.
Well, it was the Santa Cruz County Sheriff who
right. Yes, not you. Repeating his thoughts, but I appreciate it. All right. Any final stuff for us? Anybody in the room? Anything on things for Dave? Well, thank you so much for your research, and we may have you back to talk more about the U.S. side at some point if I can't find a speaker in time.
Happy to.
And also let us know. I'll let you know next time we're doing maybe like a party or event, because beaming you in for those VR tours sounds quite intriguing.
Awesome. And I will talk to you about sending you zines when they're ready.
Sounds great. We look forward to them. All right. Thanks, Dave. Bye. You good, John? Oh, John ended it. We're good. Okay. And if anybody needs a parking validation because they park in the garage, I have some, so get at me. We also tend to go over to the hotel bar and chat afterwards, so if you'd like to hang out, socialize with your fellow digital celebrities nerds, we'd love to have you. If not, we'll see you next month. Thank you.
Need some help?
No, I mean, I just gotta break this up. I think we're good. I just need to tell my laptop's dead. Yeah. Just gonna get this all set up. Well, Heather's been sharing with everybody. Wait, so did Heather tell you about it, or she knew about it? Well, Heather found out about her, and yes, there's this site that it's because it's all public data, because planes have to broadcast this information. Yes. Oh, man, well, yeah, we know all about it. Heather's obsessed with tracking it now. Well, I actually agree with that because it's a real safety thing, actually. Oh, no, that's... No, it's anybody who thinks that is a good idea, blind trust them. Yeah, that's kind of horrific. actually.
Exactly. Well, what if I get a call that one of the ex-wife's job? Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. You don't need any help to get over there?
No, it's right over there. Of course. Just a sec.
Because what he has is interesting. You made it sound like, I can't get anybody else. I'll
No,
have
he
you come back.
No, he needed. No, it's a joke.
Oh, okay.
Do you need a thing that you park in the garage?
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
All right. You gonna go sit down?